Welcome, Susan Sarandon, Academy Award-winning actor and activist. So excited to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Exciting times.
Yes. So tell us why you've been out on the streets. You've been visiting encampments. Why is this issue about Palestine an important issue to you?
Well, for so many reasons. I mean, I've been following what's been going on in Palestine for many years, and that finally has gotten to the point where it's undeniable, which is the positive part of this onslaught and this genocide, is that suddenly the narrative is being challenged. The history is being known to more people of what happened before October 7th. And thanks to the advent of cell phones, we're actually, for better or worse, seeing firsthand what a genocide looks to as it unfolds. And despite the fact that our government is refusing to in any way absorb the enormity of the situation, I think that real Americans, as you can tell from the polls, want a ceasefire. They can't stomach this, even if you're someone who isn't living online and is looking at statistics through mainstream media, which are, definitely not on the side of Palestinians. Just the fact that we're giving so much money without any strings to a country that has healthcare, has subsidized housing, has free education, while we simultaneously with our tax money are knocking down all their institutions in Gaza, all the universities, wiping out culture, wiping out whole families. It's just gotten to the point now where it's undeniable. And the fact that so much of it is being done without a vote, and that we are continuing to allow illegal settlements. So we're in much deeper in this travesty than we are in other places, which are also deserving of examination. But the fact that it's so immediate in terms of, our funding, that if we were to say cut off even for a few days, the whole thing would stop. It's very hard to just let it go. You can only deny for so long. And now with this amazing uptick of actions by kids that are so well versed in the history, and we're seeing it, Jewish kids, Muslim kids, just WASPy kids, everybody that is offended by this lack of humanity and who is not affiliated to a party, is not Democrat, is not Republican, but is just human, and says no to this kind of horrifying bullying by the United States, I think just has given me faith. That and unions are the only two things that I see going forward that really, really say, please stay in this country. We can change the system. We can do something. And I was just, I was up at Columbia. I was just now with the NYU kids, and they know what's going on. And they're embracing, they're praying together. It's just so beautiful to see what's possible. And to see them throwing off this yoke of censorship and discrimination and hatred and greediness and refusing to accept it. To me, this is just everything. So I'm so happy that I can go and say I stand with you. I mean, I can do very, very little as an individual, but when we're all together, then things start to happen, and we're seeing through the whole across the United States. And what happens is that Columbia made this mistake. They just overreacted. They could have just let it sit, and it would have gotten much less press. And now they've got the teachers quitting. I know that they have a niece at Barnard. I know that the kids that came to do the tours, because that's what's going on. So all these kids that were accepted at Columbia refused to do the tours, and they're sitting with the protesters. The kids that were hired to give the tours are refusing to give the tours. It's gone all the way down, and it's so inspiring and so hopeful. I'm really excited for the potential of what's going on now.
It seems like what you've observed is very different from what some of the media reports have been. Can you talk about that disconnect between what they're describing as kind of like scary, hateful protests versus what you're actually seeing and experiencing at these encampments?
Well, I think that the pro-Zionist narrative is being challenged in a very, very serious way. And so it's very important for the mouthpieces of power, which are the CNN, MSNBCs, New York Times, to do as much as they can to sell a narrative that is, I was on, when I went to Columbia, they had my name. When they were reporting on it, they had my name and then something about threatened students with a chainsaw, which then related to someone else in an article, but made it seem, if you're just looking at clickbait, that somehow I was raging with a chainsaw at Columbia. Now, that's a really extreme example, but you have just the passive and aggressive voices in the New York Times, which lots of studies have been done to show how many times the active voice was used to describe what was going on to Israelis. And this, this false narrative, which about how Jewish kids on campus are being terrified because they see protests when you have students in Gaza or even students at Columbia who were sprayed and had to be hospitalized. And what's so horrifying about that is that the charge of anti-Semitism is real and it should be leveled in some cases. And now it's just being thrown around so that it's losing its power, which is very dangerous. And I think the other thing that the news has done is to constantly reinforce this idea that all Zionists are Jewish, that all Jewish are Zionists.
Right.
And it's been very important and very difficult to change that narrative. I mean, I needed to really get my head on straight, and I was educated by all the Jewish protesters that are at these gatherings to make it very clear that every Jewish person, no matter if they had relatives in the Holocaust, whether or not they, went through a Jewish upbringing, does not claim to be a Zionist. And in fact, there's just as many, if not more, Christian Zionists.
Yeah, there are more.
That is not a religion. So that in itself has been reinforced by the media constantly. And when you hear, when the leaked memos come out that the BBC and all of these have said, always say Hamas, do not say Palestinian,
right.
do not say Gaza, always say war, anything they can do to make it seem like it's a justifiable war with a huge army that's in the same measure as the Zionist forces, and this reiteration of the only democracy there in the Middle East, and all of these tropes that have been over and over and over again, and then ignoring or challenging these statistics are Hamas statistics.
Right.
Don't trust those statistics. This is all fake. This is staged. I think it's harder and harder to maintain those things. So what's happening now is they're coming at anybody who has a voice, who has the truth, who has facts. I mean, now when I go to speak, I don't say anything except facts because everything's so twisted or cut out in order to give the wrong impression. So at least if they're facts, they're facts. But even then, they say, oh, yeah, but those are Hamas facts, So clearly, this has been aided and abetted by, and I'm sure there are journalists who want to get in and can't get in.
Right.
And CNN told us that they're watched when they come in. So we're so dependent on the journalists who are using their cell phones in Gaza, in the West Bank. But, when people say to me, it's so complicated. I think really the thing that's complicated is knowing this and trying to stay neutral.
Very well said, Susan. And I want to thank you so much for joining us, but also for your fearless activism in spite of a lot of pushback that you've gotten. So we really appreciate that.
I just say that I'm afraid. It's not fearless, but I think sometimes if you don't, what you have to live with later is much more difficult.
Well, for your not fearless, but very courageous activism.
Thank you, Katie.
Bye, Susan.
Bye. Have fun at the Seder.